When I first picked up New Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo DS again, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew it was one of those games that brought back the classic Mario side-scrolling formula for a newer generation, but I wanted to see if it still holds up when you look at it critically, with a mix of nostalgia and a modern perspective. Spending hours revisiting it, I realized that there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than I remembered. The first thing that hits you is how familiar it feels. The gameplay instantly reminds you why the Mario formula works so well. Running, jumping, stomping on enemies, collecting coins, it all feels natural. The level design is clever without being overwhelming. Each stage introduces new challenges gradually, giving you room to experiment while also teaching you the mechanics organically. Even now, I found myself appreciating how precise the controls are. Mario responds exactly as you expect, whether you're making a long jump over lava or timing a mid-air stomp on an enemy. That level of precision is something that's often missing in modern platformers, where sometimes momentum or physics feel floaty. In this game, every jump and movement feels intentional. One of the most striking things about revisiting this game is the pacing. The levels are short enough that you never feel stuck, but long enough to feel rewarding when you complete them. You can see how the developers balanced challenge and accessibility. Early levels ease you into the game, but later worlds ramp up the difficulty with tighter platforming, moving obstacles, and cleverly placed enemies. I spent a lot of time experimenting with hidden paths, alternate routes, and warp areas, and it's clear that the designers wanted you to explore and replay levels, not just rush to the finish. The power-up system is classic Mario, but the way it's implemented here adds some subtle depth. You've got your traditional mushrooms, fire flowers, and starmen, but the timing and placement in levels make a bigger difference than I remembered. Choosing when to grab a power-up, when to save it, and when to take risks adds a quiet layer of strategy to the platforming. For example, sometimes holding off on a fire flower until a tricky section can completely change how easy or difficult a level feels. I found myself making these little tactical decisions constantly, which added a surprising amount of depth for a game that on the surface seems straightforward. Graphically, the game holds up really well for the DS hardware. The character sprites are crisp, animations are fluid, and each world has a distinct visual identity. I spent a lot of time in the different environments just noticing the details, the background animations, the enemy designs, and the way the camera frames each section of a level. It's subtle, but it contributes a lot to the overall experience. Even with the limitations of the DS screen, nothing feels cluttered, and every element is readable, which is critical for a platformer where timing is everything. The soundtrack is another highlight. The music carries that familiar Mario charm while adapting to each world's atmosphere. Whether you're running through grassy plains, dodging hazards in desert stages, or navigating tricky underwater sections, the music subtly guides your mood and keeps the momentum going. Combined with the responsive sound effects, the thump of a jump, the splat of an enemy defeat, the chime of collecting coins, it's a sensory experience that makes the gameplay feel even more satisfying. From a modern perspective, I also noticed how well the game balances challenge for different skill levels. Casual players can enjoy the story mode, learn the mechanics, and progress without too much frustration. At the same time, speedrunners or more experienced players can dig into hidden star coins, secret paths, and time-based challenges. Revisiting the game now, I see how well it scales in difficulty without ever feeling unfair. Every death feels like your mistake, not a flaw in the game, and that's something that's increasingly rare in modern platformers. The level design itself deserves some deeper analysis. I spent a lot of time replaying levels to see how the placement of platforms, enemies, and hazards affects strategy. It's deceptively simple at first glance, but there's a rhythm to how you move through each stage. Some sections require precise timing, others encourage creative use of power-ups, and a few are outright puzzles in disguise. The way the game alternates between high-intensity action and calmer sections creates a nice pacing that keeps you engaged for hours. Exploration is another element I appreciated more than I expected. Every level has hidden areas, alternate paths, and secret items that reward curiosity. Star coins in particular encourage you to replay levels and master your movements. I found myself revisiting stages multiple times just to find them all, and that gave the game much more longevity than I remembered. The design cleverly balances risk and reward. You often have to take challenging jumps or navigate tricky sections to get those secrets, but the payoff feels worth it. The boss encounters are also worth discussing. They're not overly complicated, but they're designed to test the skills you've learned up to that point. Timing, observation, and pattern recognition are key, and each boss fight has its own personality. I spent some time analyzing how the bosses escalate in difficulty, and I realized that even the simpler ones teach you something about spacing and movement that applies to later levels. These fights feel meaningful, not just a break from platforming. One subtle thing I noticed is how the game encourages creative play. You're often given multiple ways to approach a section. Some players may rush forward, others may explore hidden paths, and power-ups can be used in multiple ways. I spent a lot of time experimenting with different techniques, like using a shell to knock out multiple enemies, or performing chain jumps to maximize speed. The flexibility of approach gives the game replay value and keeps it interesting beyond just completing levels. From a personal perspective, revisiting this game reminded me why I fell in love with platformers in the first place. There's a sense of flow when everything clicks, timing jumps perfectly, landing a sequence of attacks on enemies, and navigating tricky obstacles with precision. That flow is something that's hard to capture in modern platformers that often rely on cinematic presentation rather than gameplay fundamentals. Spending hours with New Super Mario Bros. Reminded me that tight controls, clever level design, and responsive gameplay are timeless. Another element I appreciated on this revisit is how well the game rewards experimentation without punishing players too harshly. Trying new routes, taking risks for star coins, or using power-ups in unexpected ways almost always feels fun, even if you fail. That balance between challenge and accessibility is one of the reasons the game still feels relevant. It respects the player's skill while keeping frustration to a minimum. Even though the DS hardware has limitations, I think the game uses the platform beautifully. The dual screen setup is utilized subtly without feeling gimmicky. You never feel like the camera or screen space is limiting your ability to play. Everything is designed to be clear, readable, and functional, which is critical for a platformer where timing is everything. Looking at it through a modern lens, I also see how well this game has influenced later entries in the Mario series. Many of the mechanics, power-up systems, and level design philosophies seen here have been refined and expanded in subsequent games, but the core ideas were already solid in this title. Playing it now, you can appreciate the thought and care that went into crafting a platformer that respects the series' legacy and the player's experience. Overall, New Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo DS is more than just a nostalgic trip. It's a carefully crafted platformer that balances challenge, accessibility, and replayability. The controls are precise, the level design is clever, the music and visuals complement the gameplay perfectly, and there's enough depth to keep players engaged well beyond the main story. Whether you're revisiting it for the first time in years or discovering it fresh, it's clear why this game remains one of the standout Mario titles on the DS. For me personally, spending this much time with it again reminded me why I fell in love with platformers in the first place. There's a sense of flow when everything clicks. Timing jumps perfectly, landing a sequence of attacks on enemies, and navigating tricky obstacles with precision. That flow is something that's hard to capture in modern platformers that often rely on cinematic presentation rather than gameplay fundamentals. Spending hours with New Super Mario Bros. Reminded me that tight controls, clever level design, and responsive gameplay are timeless. Thanks for watching this full review and analysis. If you enjoyed diving deep into the gameplay, level design, and overall experience of New Super Mario Bros., stick around because there are plenty more classic titles we can revisit to see how they hold up today. Spending time in these worlds isn't just nostalgia, it's a chance to appreciate timeless game design in action.